Hey guys, it's Matt. In this video, I'm going to beg the researchers and the channels that cover the impossible architecture in general, not just the World's Fairs, the impossible architecture in general. I'm going to beg these channels to please put forth your best theory or explanation as to what is going on here. For anybody rolling their eyes at this video, say, oh, another truth are going to cover the World's Fairs. Another word. Yeah, I'm not going to cover the World's Fairs. It's being covered. I've covered it in the past, the exhibition of 1876, because it was in Philadelphia, and I had somebody I interviewed, or was a friend of the family who's now 80, who was in some of those buildings before they were torn down. So I'll talk about that again. But no, I'm not just going to cover that the World's Fairs. I'm going to beg the channels that cover the impossible architecture. I'm all over the place. I cover this from time to time. I go into different topics about the nature of reality itself. I'm going to beg them, what is your best theory as to what is going on here? Just saying that a new history was introduced in sometime in the 1800s and inherited buildings, and then that's it. That's the end of the theory. It's not good enough, guys. The truth community, first of all, these are the Michelle Gibson, others that cover this. I'm going to hit play in a second, guys. Might as well hit play now. This is the Louisiana Purchase Exposition, 1904. I'm gonna hit play on the Michelle Gibson channel so you can start seeing the images as I just talk over it. And I've watched, these are all our brethren, our truther brethren. I've watched the Michelle Gibson channel 20, 25 times. I never miss a John Levi video. I appreciate all the channels that kind of focus on the impossible architecture. But let's just start with the exhibitions. Many channels have covered this, like Conspiracy R Us. I don't know who that person is, but we guys, I think I can speak for people in this community who would say, yes, give me your theory as to what is going on here, and we don't care. You don't have to get it exactly right. Just give me a big theory. Let's ponder some things. Don't just tell me over and over again that we were some sort of new history was introduced in sometime in the 1800s, and these are inherited buildings. It's just, that's not going far enough. That's not. There's too many holes in that. What's your theory? What's the biggest thinking you can come up with? I'll give you my theory. In the end, you won't like it, but there's too many holes in almost any other theory than what my theory is. I'll present it at the end. So first off, let's just start with the basics. I watch these channels. I appreciate what they do, the incredible level of research, and these are my brothers in truth. I'm not trying, if I say the wrong thing here or get flippant, you know how I can get sometimes, make some jokes. I'm not trying to cause some sort of battle or war between truth channels. I'm just asking you to come up with a bigger, grander theory than telling me over and over again our history was reintroduced in the mid-1800s in inherited buildings. That's like, it's not quite Russians hacked the election, Russians hacked the election, Russians hacked the election, Russians hacked the election. But we don't need to hear that. What is your theory? Nobody's going to hold you. If some truth channel that covers this stuff says there was a group of aliens from the Palladians that came down and built these buildings at a certain period of time, then they just morphed out of here like the last scene in Stargate, I would say thank you. Thank you for offering us a theory as to how this came to be. Okay, nobody in the truth community is going to hold you over the fire and say, oh, that theory's got it wrong, or I don't like that big thinking. We appreciate big thinking. Don't be afraid to come up with your theory. If you think aliens built it, say it. We'll appreciate that. But don't just play it safe and stop at step one and say, timeline reintroduced 1800s inherited buildings. That's not good enough anymore. You know, some of my theories are, crazy as shit, but I'm not afraid to say them. Okay, so let's start with the basics, okay? All these channels that do this, I consider you a brother. I'm not trying to pick a fight. Okay, most people watching this will be like, yeah, Matt, it's time for these channels to come up with their theory, no matter how out there. Number two, there's no doubt about it. None of this could have been built per anything we understand about what reality is. It's simply impossible. We agree, right? I covered the 1876 exposition in Philadelphia. Again, the endless pictures here, the Michelle Gibson channel. I'll leave a link. If I'm going to mirror over an entire video, I'm certainly going to leave a link. she knows someone or something that got pictures from a whole book on the 1904 Louisiana Purchase Exposition, St. Louis, Missouri. And okay, it doesn't matter. 1904, Pan Pacific, 1915, San Francisco, 1876, Philadelphia. You have the same repeating themes. There's no way the buildings could have been built. Even in 1915, this is after the portable diesel engine, electricity, they still couldn't have been built in the time frame or how they say. There's so many problems with these stories. And it's not just the World's Fairs. It's all the impossible architecture. Go back to the Colosseum in Rome, or the Great Pyramid, or the Parthenon. It's a lot of the channels that cover these World's Fairs. It would be the same problem explaining all the other impossible architecture. Tie everything together. What is the grand theory? Don't just tell me inherited buildings. It just doesn't work. Okay, it doesn't work unless it doesn't work for me. All right. Now, if you want to have a theory as to how it can work, I'll try to lay some breadcrumbs down. Hopefully, not pissed on as to what the line, how we should think about this. But we agree. There's no way these grand palaces could have been built in these time frames at any time. At any time, there's just no way. I covered Philadelphia. And I interviewed a friend of the family who's now 80, who was in some of the big buildings before they tore them down, like Horticultural Hall, 1876. He was in them, or in a few of them, in probably the late 40s, early 50s. Now, Memorial Hall in Philadelphia still exists. That's it's not as grand as some of these buildings in the St. Louis, but there's just, 1876 coming off the Civil War. How could that possibly have been built? Memorial Hall in Philadelphia. But, so we agree. There's just no way. All right. There's no way any of this could be built. You have problems like 1876 after the Civil War, the whole South after Sherman's March is in ruins, but you're building these grand palaces. You get into issues like, well, where did the labor come from? It's like the same issue with the Taj Mahal in India. The Wikipedia, one of my favorite Wikipedias of all time. I've talked about it 5 times. I'll talk about another 50 probably over the years. It says, this is one of my favorite lines of all time. Go look up the Taj Mahal on Wikipedia. It took 25,000 artisans. 25,000 artisans. And how do you even gather up 25,000 artisans in 1600 and something India? They just get the word out over the internet. They use Yelp. Did they post, like I've said before, did they post little signs at every brothel between here and New Delhi or Delhi saying we need high-level artisans that can construct massive palaces? I know thousands of you are just laying around doing nothing but smoking hookah, getting high on opium. We need you to kick your habit. And per this little, when we used to be in the old days, you'd be little signs on bulletin boards and stuff, and there'd be rips at the bottom, and you'd say, take one. You'd rip a little phone number off at the bottom, a piece of paper. Is that what they just posted that shit all over India? Is like, if you're a grand artisan that can come out, using masonry, incredible structures, sculptures, you can create million-pound domes that aren't even 1/1000th of a degree off from each other. If you can do that, take one. Just rip this little piece of paper and then come see us. I mean, how'd they even find 25,000 artisans? It's impossible. Just laying around doing nothing. The people, it's the same family lineage going all the way back to the Great Pyramid, just laying around and waiting to be called upon again. It's absurd. But guys that cover this, guys and girls that cover this stuff, please give us your theories. I'll give you mine at the end. You won't really like it, but you might end up shaking your head like, yeah, that might be it. It's not. Well, you'll see. Okay, it's not. It's going to let you down. But this isn't my thing. All right, this isn't my thing. And then I'm gonna poke some problems with channels that cover this not addressing certain things, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But all right, in addition to the materials, labor, construction, you do have issues with the timing of some of this. Again, 1876 Philadelphia. I don't know if it was the Machinery Hall or Agricultural Hall. 18 acres inside In the building inside was 18 acres in Philadelphia, 1876. Now, somebody for 1915 San Francisco could say, "Well, Matt, they had portable diesel cranes and this and that," and even it doesn't explain it, because where do you get the skill and the expertise, or the Taj Mahal artisans to come in and build this stuff? Just they laying around the Mission District in San Francisco. They're up in the what's it called? Eddy Street. I don't know. I'll think of it in a second. Just laying around up in the Marina District. Where do you get these people? So none of it could have been done, and especially not in the time frame where they mine the materials. And if anybody's screaming at this presentation, say, "Well, Matt, there's a whole," some of the people that cover this saying that a lot of it was facade, or some, I don't know what you like, plaster of Paris or styrofoam, or no. Most of the people that cover this believe, or through the research, it was real materials, and the pictures show a lot of pictures are from afar, but the pictures show it is real materials. Now, even if it's not real materials, that palace that or 18 acres inside or whatever, the palace with all the sculpturing and the top of the oh, look, they had a little marathon during the exhibition. Isn't that nice? The top of the columns still have all that ornate sculpture, the leaves and all that. I mean, you couldn't. How would you even do that even if it's a facade? How do you do that in 1904, 1915, or 1876? So it seems like these are real materials, guys, and the reason for that, it's overwhelming that they're real materials, because it's almost just as hard to do it fake. Well, how do you do that? But you can go to Memorial Hall in Philadelphia. I've talked about it before, the Please Touch Museum for kids. I don't know if it's open now or what. I'd like to go down there at some point, because they have a small model of how the World's Fair was in 1876 inside Memorial Hall, Philadelphia, the Please Touch Museum. But it's real giant stone. Everything's stone. You go just like across the way in Fairmount Park, Philadelphia Museum of Art. It's all real. It's all stone. You can go touch it. So if Memorial Hall, the original building that exists from all these fairs, if that's all real stone and real craftsmanship and real sculpture and granite, stone, marble, soapstone, masonry, whatever, then they all were. Well, Matt, they built one for real and the rest were just styrofoam. No, okay, enough said on that. So there's just the other hosts of problems. I like the two biggest problems with these world fairs, assuming any of this could be done at all, and you had all the builders and masons and artistries and artisans just laying around doing nothing, waiting to be called upon for the next gigantic job. Or would you like to recreate the Parthenon 50 times over? Then take one, rip this off at the bottom. Two biggest problems is, one is, I've already talked about, I won't mention it again, the post-Civil War Philadelphia, like the whole South in ruins, but you're going to build these grand palaces. That's just ridiculous. I'll provide my theory at the end, guys, of what's going on here. You won't like it. Again, the purpose of this video is not for me to solve it. This isn't my area. The purpose of this video is to beg the channels that cover this to provide big thinking as to explain all the problems I'm going to present in this video. And if you're wrong, no one's going to hold you to it. Think around 2 corners, and then 3, and then 4. So the other big problem that is just hilarious is 1915, Pan Pacific, San Francisco. You got 2 big problems there with that one, where they built all the same thing, grand palaces and all buildings with 15 acres inside and all this stuff, flying a plane around inside, and all this stuff they say happened in San Francisco. All these wonderful things happen in these world fairs and these grand palaces, these buildings constructed all of glass when they shouldn't have been able to basically build a log cabin back then with donkeys and mules and hammers and jackasses and ropes. San Francisco, little problem if you're going to do the World's Fair, little something called World War I was taking place. So they say, of course, all these World's Fairs carry the same story. Millions of people attended. Well, where'd they stay? Would they have a bunch of DoubleTree hotels and Sheratons and Hiltons and Fairmont hotels and just all this? Where'd they stay in San Francisco if 2-point-something million people came through Pan Pacific in San Francisco in 1915, from like February to December of 1915 or whatever it was? Even if there was a place to stay, they just lie out in the dirt in tents. There's no place to stay for millions of people. Do you ever see what's it called? What's the I'll think of it in a second. There's no place for them to stay, but there's a little problem called World War I. And so that would have kept, I would say minimum would have kept all of Europe from coming to the San Francisco Expo. But anybody that needs to sail, the millions of people, how do they even get there? You know how long it would take just to get up to San Francisco from Argentina or Chile or Mexico? It would take months of travel back then. Have no Chinese bullet trains where the train hovers over the rail at 300 and some miles an hour. How would most people would have to sail. Well, those German U-boats won't bother us. Oh, come on, Fred, pack your bag. Those German U-boats won't bother us. We'll just put a big sign on it, going to the World's Fair, San Francisco Pan Pacific Expo or bust. Just paint that on the side. So when the periscope comes up, they'll say, don't blow that boat the F out of the water. They're just friendly people going to the World's Fair. Well, Captain, couldn't that be a facade? And they're really transporting ammunition and musicians, and not musicians, but munitions, kind of under the guise of going to the World's Fair? Yeah, it could be full of explosives going against our German war effort. Blow it the F up. Nobody would go out and sail anywhere with these stories of U-boats and who's the U-boat commander. It would never happen. You could create all these palaces in San Francisco for 1915. You get like 40 people showing up. There would be no problem with hotel room space. But they say, whatever they say, 2-point-some million people. I was thinking of Deadwood. I think it's called the HBO series Deadwood. Now, you watch Deadwood, and the Deadwood movie, guys, they made 10 years later, is actually pretty good. If you watch the Deadwood series, season 1, 2, 3, about the Old West, and that is very believable. There's a lot of history that points the Old West was like that. Just you can't take your guns in town, that kind of thing. Well, Deadwood, there's one hotel owned by that creepy mayor. It would be like, San Francisco wouldn't be like that, but there'd be like 4 or 5 major hotels in 1915. Where do you put up 2-point-whatever million people? They'd be sleeping out in the dirt, in the Mission District. I was thinking of Eddy Street, the Tenderloin. They'd be sleeping up in the Tenderloin, people in their $1,000 suits alongside the bums. So there's nowhere to house them. Nobody would ever travel. It would take months to get there. If you came up from Central or South America, or even would take forever to get there from Phoenix or from Houston or Dallas. Nobody would sail because of World War I. World War I official start is sometime in 1914. So you build all these palaces for nothing. There's a lot of problems beyond just creating the architecture with these World's Fair stories. Okay, guys, continuing the theme of begging the channels that cover this to provide the grandest theory, the biggest thinking. Nobody's going to hold them to it. Here's a little bit of a problem, all right? You can't just say, new timeline, 1800s and some, inherited. That's not good enough. You got to go farther. Please, you got to go farther. Like I've said before, now maybe there is an explanation for this, but what is the grand theory? I have a family tree book. I've said this before, that the final revision that my family holds says final revised 1902 or something. It's not. It's my mother's side of the family, which is German and English heritage, related back to the most famous relative is Clement Seymour, The Night Before Christmas. And all through the house, not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. Oh, Matt's related to Clement Seymour? I knew this was some sort of shill channel. That's what the system used to paint the picture of modern-day Christmas. Absolutely. That's what the system used to paint the picture of modern-day Christmas. I don't know. The Moore family comes through my mother's, not German heritage, but English heritage. You want to hold me that? I don't know. I don't. All I know is in the damn family tree book. It's not an original of him sketching out The Night Before Christmas, but they have like a copy of it. Anyway, it was started to be put together a long, long time before 1902 or 3 or whatever. It's his final revision. And it's like pages like badly bound together. It's nothing that came off a printing press. But a big section of it is who married whom, going back to 1600 and something. Okay, fine. This reality. I'm a guy that says this world's not very real. This reality can pull a lot of reality breakdowns off, and I'm not saying it's impossible. You can't say to me, "Well, Matt, you're the one always talking about reality breakdowns." Well, why does you're obviously in this section you're alluding to the fact that your family tree book doesn't mention anything about a world plasma event mud flood reset. It just says who marries whom from 1600. Doesn't say anything about some massive problem in the world. So fine, I agree with the number of reality breakdowns. I'm not saying because the family tree doesn't mention a world cataclysm or a mud flood or anything related to what these researchers cover. I'm not saying it didn't happen because of my family tree book. If you're Mandela affected, you've seen reality change in front of your eyes. Reality can pull anything off, in my opinion, just because my family tree. But the point of this video is then, guys, what's your theory? Michelle Gibson or others as to how Matt's family tree book. Now, it doesn't matter with the theory. I just need you to come up with a theory. I beg of you. The theory, I might not like it. It might be, well, that's Matt, you just mentioned that Clement C. Moore was a relative of yours. So, of course, part of your family heritage is compromised. And for part of the family tree book that you're holding, it's real, but it was faked. They took out the sections just so that, I'm not, that doesn't make any sense to me, but at least it's a theory. I'm begging for any sort of theory. How does my family tree book not mention a world cataclysm going back to who married whom to 1600 and some? I mean, at least what I'm not going to say any theory has just as much merit as anything else. But at least if these channels said, Matt, you're Mandela affected, if reality can just change, well, then you telling me your family tree book doesn't mention a mud flood, that doesn't mean anything to me. Because maybe that was Mandela affected. I would say, okay, thank you. Maybe I don't buy it, but thank you for the theory at least. See what I'm saying? I'm not criticizing the theory or any theories as much as the lack of going there. So, but nevertheless, that is reality. We've seen a bunch of breakdowns, but there's still some rules here. Not as many as I thought. But Matt's family tree book there isn't a page like right in the middle that says, we'd like to note the entire world had a plasma event or a mud flood and hundreds of millions of people were killed. And here's a few pages, I'm not even going to say the family names I'm associated with or whatever on the German side, but it's like so-and-so wrote about it. Here's what happened. One day all this mud started flowing in and there's nothing about it. Okay. How's that? I mean, how do you explain that? I'm not, I don't know how I would explain it, but so, I'm just saying, okay, that's a factor, guys. I'm not the only one with a family tree book. There are a lot of people that have family old books and things like that. The fact remains, these events are, if reality was reset or whatever, mud flood or whatever happened, there's no mention of it in anybody's book. How? Explain that. Okay. The other problem with the main problem, of course, with inherited buildings theory, whether it be the exhibitions, Philadelphia City Hall, is where somebody somewhere, and I've gone over this before, somebody somewhere would have recorded it, would have written it somewhere. Is the control structure that perfect that when these buildings existed out west from all these, the Palace of Fine Arts in San Francisco had been out there from an ancient Tartarian civilization thousands of years ago, and the old Western guys went out with the Clint Eastwoods and the good and the bad and the ugly went out there with their 6-shooters and their horses, and they're like, look at these grand palaces. They've been out here, man, for thousands of years. There was a civilization here that, whether it be there or anywhere in the world, Philadelphia City Hall, nobody wrote it down. And the control structure, the Hillary Clinton control structure is so perfect that they were able to gobble up every piece of written history where some settler somewhere came across a building that existed here in the United States or anywhere else in the world, wrote it down, didn't have to, well, Matt, if it was put into a library, will they control that? Well, maybe it wasn't all put in a library. Maybe it was just put into somebody's personal family tree book like mine. Maybe it was a note shoved under somebody's couch. But somebody, somewhere, if these buildings were here, and I'm the one that I'm real open to reality breakdowns, but there seems to be some rules here. I don't think the Hillary Clinton type minion jerks would be so good. Everybody that came across a building that was here, an inherited building, there would have been thousands of people that wrote thousands of things down or sketched it or drew a picture. Look at this palace that was, what's this? Sketched it and then left it at home and didn't try to give it to the Library of Congress. There isn't one piece of evidence. And again, if you're saying, well, all this stuff about I'm not being open-minded enough, again, I'm asking these channels to go there. It's not about what I think. I'm open to almost anything. Yeah, I'm not going to say that again. You understand where I'm coming from there. Even the sculptures you're looking at now, these are only one out of hundreds of thousands of people can sculpt something and make it look. If you asked me to do it, it would look like three gigantic. Here, sculpt Thomas Jefferson for the World's Fair, Matt. It'll end up looking like three turds glued together or something. I mean, you have to be a master to make sculptures. Where'd those people come from? So it's all impossible, no doubt about it. But the problem with it, there's other problems with inherited buildings theories. And I was about to apologize again to these channels. If you don't understand where I'm going, then I can't. These questions need to be asked at this point. Okay, we're kind of the way the world is going. We're kind of out of time as to figuring certain things out. The real information has to supersede niceties at this point. If my presentation is not kind enough, other problems are. At least from the World's Fair perspectives, you had the buildings that represent the countries, and many of the buildings that represent the countries look like what was from that country. So you have inherited buildings thrown around very loosely and kind of recklessly around these World's Fairs. Well, how is it inherited buildings if in 1876 Philadelphia Exposition, the centennial on the 1776, the Japanese house was a big pagoda representing Japan? See what I'm saying? That's not an inherited building. The Japanese house for the World Fair is supposed to represent Japan, looks like Japan. In another World's Fair, the Swedish house supposed to represent Sweden, looks like Sweden. If it was an inherited building from Dotari, they wouldn't give it a shit about that. See what I'm saying? So, again, if anybody's saying, well, Matt, that's small thinking. Well, there could have been 6 or 7 or 8 major palaces, and then to make it look like a World's Fair, they built the Japanese house. They built the Switzerland house. And but then let these channels give me that theory. I shouldn't have to provide the theory. That's the point of this video. So you have that issue. The Japanese house, again, from the guy I interviewed who's 80, that was one of the last buildings to exist. And they kind of recreated it in Fairmount Park. There's still something there, a pagoda. He remembers when the original one was burnt down in the 40s or the 50s. So you have a building that represented, and if somebody said, well, Matt, the building in this fair that's supposed to be the New York State building, that's just some grand palace that doesn't represent New York State. I agree. There are a lot of buildings that couldn't have been constructed in the time period or the frame in which they're constructed, that these grand palaces, and that don't really represent the heritage or the history of that state. But there are a lot that do. Particularly the Asian or the Chinese or the Japanese houses. Okay? So one of the other big problems on inherited is Philadelphia itself. Okay, the same thing. Horticultural hall, machinery hall, agricultural hall. Like you walk in, 18 acres inside. There's no possible way they could have built a few years after the Civil War. But you have, Philadelphia. You have hundreds and hundreds of scholars, artists, engineers, lawyers, all sorts of. If these, you can't tell me the World's Fairs are inherited, and then that was all up there on Fairmount Park in 18. There's a lot of people, this heritage, who live in Philadelphia. You can trace their heritage back to pretty much 1776. There's hundreds or thousands of Philadelphians. But there was all these palaces up on Fairmount Park behind the Art Museum. Nobody wrote it down. Nobody told their kids. I've said this many times. I was held, the way I like to put it together, I was held by my great-grandmother when I was born in 1970. She passed just a year or so after. But she was born in the late 1800s, even as early as like 1892. We called her Grossi. Okay, so if you just do that one more jump back, you're basically at 1776. So you only need to tell 2 or 3 or 4 family members going forward in the future. These grand palaces were up here in Philadelphia when we got here, or Philadelphia City Hall there's this gigantic palace type thing that was here. You also have to cover up all the hundreds and hundreds of sketches of Philadelphia from across the way in Camden, from Jersey, sketches of Philadelphia from up on the Fairmount Park Plateau. Every single sketch or painting of early Philadelphia doesn't show Philadelphia City Hall. So the Hillary Clinton minion types they got to all the artists and they just said you don't want to paint that in. We're trying to cover up that these buildings were here. That just when you paint Philadelphia, just make sure you don't paint that in, or the men in black will come and see you. How do you explain that? Hundreds and hundreds of early pictures of Philadelphia. There's no Philadelphia City Hall. Everybody's in on it. Everybody was given instruction not to paint it. Every time somebody didn't get the instruction and painted Philadelphia City Hall in an early depiction of Philadelphia, then the men in black came up with their erasing minds pen and they just took it out of the maybe they took it out of the museum the way Dollarhide in one of the Hannibal Lecter movies just ate the Red Dragon painting. They just destroyed every evidence of anybody that sketched early Philadelphia that showed Philadelphia City Hall. So guys, you understand, there's a lot of problems. All right. Now, do I have it all figured out? Of course not. This isn't my area, and you're not going to like my theory, but at least I'm going to give you my theory. All right. There is no, you know what I'm big on now? I'm Mandela affected reality breakdowns. There is no possible way to explain this. You can't bring in all the artisans and the expertise, and there's no diesel engines and no electricity for some of the, it just couldn't, all this could not have been built in any time frame. Even if they gave them anything we understand as normal, you can give a group of people 40, 50 years to build these expositions. Couldn't have been done. Even tearing it down would have been a monumental task. How do you do that? I mean, it'd be easier to blow it up and ship it off somewhere. But still, I agree, guys. There's no way any of this could have been built for any of these expositions. And in this video, and Michelle's documented, there's not like 4 or 5 of these. There's like 25 of these, all just a few years apart. There's one even, I think, in Hanoi, Vietnam, or they're all over the world, just a few years apart. I can't explain it. Just want to talk briefly about how this, on the face of it, seems like the greatest way in the world to wake people up. And we know how useless that is, and we've discussed that at length as to why people just can never come forth to see anything that we see. But just, let's just go there again, just to do this exercise for a few minutes. You convince somebody, or you show somebody that there's just no way all of these, you just put together. I would love one of these channels, like what's happening now, this slideshow from apparently, again, this book that Michelle Gibson got her hands on outlining the St. Louis exhibition. If there was a video of somebody that covers the impossible architecture that would literally just compile, like pictures like this, compile, flashing more quickly than this, every impossible architecture building, and I mean, going back to the Parthenon, not just exhibitions, everything, 1,000 images in 1 hour, just flash with the date. Then I would really like to take that and show that to somebody. It's saying, explain this. Let's really think this through. Could any of these channels put together 1,000 images and just show one after the other with the date? And you would think that would crack anybody. You could show that, and somebody would say, there's just no way that all could have been, in any one example, it can be explained away. I've talked about recently the Cologne Cathedral. And for those that didn't see the video on it, we just do 1 minute. It's like nothing that can be described. in terms of its grand nature. It makes these exhibitions look like nothing, just like little tents. And obviously we know the grand nature of these buildings, these palaces, and Horticultural Hall in 1876 in Philadelphia. It was not torn down till about the mid 1950s, and the guy interviewed, friend of the family, was in it. And he's the grand glass that goes all the way up, fully mature palm trees from all over the world. Just 1876 after the Civil War. Of course, like here I'm doing the same thing again. But back to Cologne that I've covered recently. It's just this massive alien thing. You come around the corner, so to speak, just to give you a tiny sense of what it's like. I was there in 96 or 97 on the way to the Oktoberfest. Just a bunch of young corporate guys going stop by stop, a hurt yourself tour. One guy, when we went to Amsterdam, partaked in the red light district every night and blew through his entire wad of money. I wanted no part of it. Very just girls were beautiful, was sleazy. No interest whatsoever. Sorry. So you come around the corner, so to speak, and this thing can't even be hidden by any corner. You just go, what is that? You know how in the first Independence Day did a good job of Will Smith goes out to get the paper, and there's the massive nature of this dark ship over all of Los Angeles. It gives you an idea of the scope. It's that sort of thing. You go, what is that? This picture, the little tiny dots are people. I can't give you any sense the massive nature of this building until you see it. Now, here's the point of me making this presentation on Cologne again. In any one example, this gets back to the shotgunning 1,000 image. In any one example, the people or anybody is going to be able to explain it away. I was in the darn thing. You could fly a small plane around inside it. I could explain it away. Well, some king or some pope or something used all the resources they had available, and you just figure, if it's a one in a lifetime, they could get this done. I know. Who knows? They just spared no expense, like the guy that did Jurassic Park. Spared no expense. Brought in every artisan from the Taj Mahal from India, smoking hookah, and they just somehow did this. You don't really think about it when you're there. You marvel in it, but you don't think that it was beyond their means, because when you're there, or with the mindset of any normal person, this reality has rules. And of course it had to have been done in some way with ropes and pulleys and something we don't understand, but it had to be done in a way that fits inside the bookends of reality. Of course, nobody's inside Cologne as a regular tourist thinking outside the bookends of what should or should not been able to be done in the real world. But you can kind of point it, you could just write it off. But when if you could put these things all back to back to back, like if you could in a magic invisible Wonder Woman plane fly somebody, just after we get out of Cologne, fly to another one. You could do 12 or 15 of these in one day as a tourist. You would get a sense that there's just even seeing just 12 or 15 of them, there's no way this could have been done time after time. Then you show potentially 1,000 images and perspectives of these, then it could give someone a sense. Obviously, if just shotgunning the images would be very impactful on a lot of people, just showing it to your friend. But here's the point of this section. The moment, see, this is kind of how the reality does business in terms of like playing in truthers and making truthers completely impotent. The moment you mention inherited buildings from a prior grand civilization towards Tartaria, even if that's true, the moment you mention it, we're done. Okay, you were getting somewhere with me, Matt, showing me these buildings all the way back to the Taj Mahal and beyond us, and going back to the Great Pyramid. All this stuff created with donkeys, burros, ropes, chisels, and hammers. You were getting somewhere, but now you're going just crazy. Here you go again. Here he goes. Inherited buildings. So once you go there, you're done. You are done. So I don't know. Somebody could say, well, Matt, the person that they talk inherited buildings, they're talking to the truth community. I agree. I'm just saying, in general, you want to talk to anybody about this, you just don't go there. You don't go anywhere. You don't have to give them the answer. Just say, ponder this, how this stuff could not have been built. Well, and then what they'll do is, of course, my favorite syndrome of all time, take me to the last page of the book syndrome, or show me the story's end syndrome. Okay, you got my attention. All these things couldn't have. Here's a video that shows 1,000 of these buildings, and with the year, and I agree. I don't see how all of them could have been made with hammers, chisels, donkeys, asses, and burros. So what happened then? See, then you got to show them the last page. They demand the story's end. This is a mental defense mechanism that the masses around us employ. You've got to show them the last page of the book. Oh, you don't have all the answers? You can't show me exactly how it happened and why it happened? No, I just want you to see how it couldn't have happened. No, that's not good enough. If you can't show me the story's end, then I will, in my defense mechanism that I'm going to employ, then I'll use that to write off everything you've ever said. That's when people will go, well, why would they lie to us? Or, well, why would they do that? Explain that. I'm like, I don't know. There's a lot of possibilities. I'm just showing you what is. But then if you can't explain the story's end and put all the pieces together, this happened with me not too recent ago with a family member about all the spying. This is probably a while back, about all the spying, and the whole Snowden story is complete BS. It's just a habituation, and constantly putting out to everybody that every click is being watched, every like that is being recorded. Even phone conversations are all digital. And, once you get to somebody and somebody says, well, I have nothing to hide, I'm not doing anything wrong. You think, well, why would they do all that? Why would they do all that? And, and it goes it's not about looking for a ism suspects or whatever. The monitoring of the human being in terms of every action, every click, every email, every everything recorded, we'll talk about that some other time as to and ponder the theories there. To me, it's much more along the lines of an AI creating a actual simulation of basically like a parallel world simulation where your character or your strawman probably appears in the simulation in your real name with your same social security number, and getting to the point where it can predict what you're going to do before you do it. And to do that, it has to study every move of every person, every traffic camera, all going into, this is a way out theory, and I'm straying a little bit from the purpose of this video. We'll talk about that some other time. But you mentioned, but this is a case with a lot of our truth stuff. So in here, you mentioned inherited buildings. You've lost anybody you're trying to, quote, wake up or talk to. And that happens with a lot of the things that we present. Usually the way the system is laid into the truth community and how it's been used is there'll be one element that's necessary in our conversation, but one element that the normal guy or girl on the street would find completely insane. And that one element, just one part, is found to be insane per the way the masses think. That will destroy any attempt to go any further with you in trying to understand what you're presenting to them, if that made any sense. Okay, genius. What do you think? You complained enough about the channels that cover this not going anywhere. What do you got? What you got? Take care of yourself. Mind yourself. All right. Well, can't I say my area, but I have been known to dabble in issues regarding to the underlying metaphysical nature of reality. So let's go here. So I don't even know what I'm going to say. Trust me, I have no notes here. Take care of yourself. Okay. Now, first thing that comes to mind is to always go back and look at it from as far away as possible. Get up in your hot air balloon and fly up. Get away from the specifics of exhibitions and Pan Pacific and fly up. Okay, as you get farther and farther away from it, to me, there's no difference in impossible architecture of exhibitions and then Philadelphia City Hall and all these. But then you get far and far away. We bring in the Roman Colosseum, Parthenon, and then you go back to the original of the originals of impossible things, the Great Pyramid of Giza and the Sphinx and all that. So in terms of coming up with a theory, I think all of this has to be looked at collectively. So for anybody that's going to form an opinion on the impossible architecture as to explain it, you have to, I think the first fork in the road is, will you look at it collectively, the exhibitions all the way back to the Great Pyramid and the other 1,000 things in between, including the Cathedral of Cologne, all of which could not have been built using what we understand about known reality. First fork in the road is it all one, or are you going to make a differentiation? And the way I see it, the only difference is, obviously the shapes are different and the construction materials, and what you're looking at now, the pyramid doesn't look like Cologne, but the main difference to me is there a backstory associated with it? So for the exhibitions, of course, you can go to Wikipedia and say, this is the lead, there's a story there. This is a main difference. There's a story. Here's the lead architect. Here's suppose the amount of workers that they had working on the exhibitions. Here's how many years in advance it took. 2.5, 3 years, they were all done, which should have taken, 20 years. And there's always a backstory on Wikipedia where for the megalith sites around the world. Now, there's also a backstory on the Cathedral of Cologne. It'll say it was started under Pope so-and-so working with Queen or King so-and-so. There's but the backstory kind of goes away over time. So you get to the megalith sites or the ancient wonders of the world. Well, maybe that's not right either, because there's a backstory on some of the ancient wonders of the world, like the Colossus at Rhodes. But say let's just go to the pyramid, or the Pyramid of the Sun and the Moon in Mexico. There's no backstory, and not just some vague that the Egyptians did it, or the Incas did it, or the Mayans did it. I'm not talking about some vague notion. I'm saying nobody signed their name to this thing. Whoever built this thing, and we'll go there if it was even built. Is it a part of reality itself? We'll go there in a minute. But see, no builder signed their name to this. They didn't sketch in hieroglyphics in a few tablets at the bottom of it. Well, this was a little bit about our society who did this, and nothing. Nobody signed their name. It's all guessing as to what Egyptian pharaoh did this or that. It's all nonsense. They don't know. Ramses the First, or they don't know. And then it's the same with a lot of the megalithic sites. Well, you're going to spend all this time building this megalithic site that shouldn't have been built, should have never been able to be built, millions and tens of millions of tons dragged from 20 miles away. How do you even quarry and mine this stuff? And they didn't leave anything about their own culture. Where'd they go? What happened to them? Why aren't they still there walking around the pyramid? So you understand, not the words that are coming out of my mouth, but you understand what I'm saying there. See, reality has to deliver a backstory on Pan Pacific Expo of 1915. It has to. Nobody would buy if there was no backstory. Just exhibition. Who's the architect? We don't know. How many years did it take before they started building on the site? We don't know. So maybe there has to be a backstory for the stuff that's a little closer. There has to be a backstory for the Cathedral of Cologne. But that's basically one of the only differences. I want to lump them together. There's just, I'm showing a picture of anybody listening, the Great Pyramid. There's just no possible way. I mean, this is the granddaddy of them all. This takes the cake. I mean, the Truth Community ran with, was it 5 or 6 years ago, right around the time all the Truth Community was running with the Stonehenge is fake and all that, and because there's pictures of them working on Stonehenge with cranes and this and that. Oh, we caught him. We really got him. Well, that's what they wanted you to see. If you discovered pictures of them working on Stonehenge with cranes and it's so fake, they wanted you to see that. That's how it works. You being played. We're being played. I almost take the opposite, that it's more real. It's more mystical. There's more mysterious powers or portals with Stonehenge because they showed me guys working on it with the cranes. They want me to think it's fake. That's how it works. But the Truth Community was running with this saying, oh, there's sand. It's just sand filled. Even if it was, I mean, this is nonsense. People that haven't been out to the site, say it's just sand filled, or all this nonsense that comes out of the Truth Community. Even if it was, And it was all, how do you stack sand up 400 feet surrounded by stone? And come on. Anyway, enough of that. If some truthers want to go down these ridiculous avenues I did years ago, I'm just using an example as to how we were played, especially with Stonehenge. Oh, that went all over 4 or 5 years ago. Look how, here's pictures of them working on Stonehenge with modern cranes, and it's all fake. That's what they wanted you to see then. We know that now. Even I kind of fell for it back in the day. It was like, oh, look, it's fake. Anyway, you understand, not the words that are coming out of my mouth, but you understand what I'm saying. So I lump them all together. Any explanation as to is going to me, it's going to apply equally to the Great Pyramid, equally to Cologne, and equally to the exhibitions. Whatever's happening with reality itself, I believe it's a commonality that's linked to all impossible architecture. Not like this impossible architecture over here, Matt, can be explained because the ancient Egyptians knew how to levitate blocks and put them in place that way, just like the scene in X-Men Apocalypse. Or the exhibitions, here's how that, I don't think there's separate stories, all of which fall outside of the bookends of reality. I think the whatever explanation is going to apply pretty equally to all of these sites or monuments or structures or megaliths that should not, or per what we understand about reality, could not, under any circumstance, have been built. Like, I broke down my old Buick broke down in the middle of the Baltimore Beltway, and if it was level, I could have pushed it off to the side of the road. It was literally a traffic jam. I was in the middle lane, 2 lanes of beeping on the left and right. It was already a traffic jam, and that's why the car overheated and broke down. But I was trying to push up a little bit of a grade, couldn't budge the car. 5-6 degrees, could not budge the car. Where it was level, I could have pushed it off. You know how hard it is to move stones up hundreds of feet, up to 400 feet? Forget moving along the ground. Moving it up is impossible back in that day. This is Petra, Jordan. With any of these sites, though, there's a whole host of things that make no sense. Sometimes there's a little bit different areas that make no sense depending on the site. But then you get into Petra, Jordan. Oh, this is, of course, an ancient civilization, huge amphitheater. But, okay, why is there this facade of a building like Philadelphia City Hall? Well, Matt, don't you understand? This proves mud flood. Why is mud flood and Tartaria always tied together in a truth presentation with impossible architecture? If I look at a building, or I say an exhibition couldn't have been done in that day with the tools available to them, or I look at a building like Philadelphia City Hall, 1870 to 1900, that could not have been built. It's hundreds of millions of pounds or even tons or whatever it might be. Why does that have to be tied into mud flood? Why does that have to be tied into reset? Why does that have to be tied into... I can understand more why it's tied into a past civilization like Tartaria. That makes more sense to me, of course. Well, if something can't be built, there's a whole civilization and people here that had the technology to build it, or were able to make stone the equivalent of as light as a feather, then put it back to stone, or had techniques that were not available. I understand that. I don't understand how the ancient architecture why does it have to relate to mud flood all the time? One's a mud flood, one's some sort of a reset or a cataclysm, and one's buildings that shouldn't have been built, whether it be this or Giza or the exhibition of 1915. And the other thing about 1915 in San Francisco I didn't even mention is, forget World War I. The whole city was supposedly wiped out in 1906. You want to go where, honey? The exhibition in 1950, that place they were all killed. Just about 9 years before, they were all killed. We ain't going there. They say here in my tabloid post, another big one's coming. They wouldn't have gone, they would have to rebuild the whole city plus do an exhibition. It's so absurd. I didn't even mention that. But, so guys, let's stick to the point here. We got to get onto the theories here. Maybe that's why this video is getting so long. I'm scared to present my theory. But, so someone say, Matt, this proves mud flood. Look at well, maybe, but the whole back end, it's just like a facade in stone. Looks like Philadelphia City Hall in the front, but just stone in the back. The back was apparently melted. Well, why didn't it melt the front then? Whatever happened? None of it. See, when none of it makes sense, guys, the answer or the theory whether their theory is right or wrong, at least you should dabble in a theory that's outside your bookends of known reality. Stop trying to stick within the bookends all the time. You could say mud flood to me all you want when looking at Petra. Well, then why wasn't the front melted? Well, that wasn't facing the plasma vent. Boy, come on. It's just none of it makes any sense. None of it makes any sense. So you come up with a theory on this. You got to come with something that's way outside the bookends of known reality. You got to come thinking around 2, 3, 4 corners, not one corner, right? And nobody's going to get on anybody in the truth community that thinks, that wants to think that big. And then you go into other structures like the Parthenon and, not Greece, Nashville. Nashville has its own Parthenon to scale, and exactly what it was in Greece, including a gigantic statue inside of Athena, supposedly painted in gold. The statue is so big, it holds a figurine or a character or another statue in its palm of its hand, and that statue it's holding in the palm of its hand is 6 feet tall. So they stripped down and got rid of or stole the gold from the original Athena statue in the Parthenon, which is now ruins in Greece. So, of course, in 1897, it would be completely reconstructed in Nashville for another. It's not a World's Fair, but it's like it was one of these exhibitions. Nashville Exhibition, 1897. I spoke to somebody recently that was there. Said, of course, it's no facade. It's all stone. The inside, there are these gigantic, huge doorways. The Athena statue is just gigantic. And, well, what does that have to do with celebrating U.S. heritage or history or Nashville heritage? What does that have to do with whatever they said was going on in 1897? But it is so mind-boggling, this stuff, guys. So that about 40% of the truth community is screaming at me, inherited buildings, that was there. It was? Well, where was... There's people around Nashville going back probably as early as probably 1800. Nobody wrote a sketch, said this thing was here. Nobody documented anywhere that this thing was here as an inherited building. Not one person wrote one thing down or made a sketch that there was a civilization here. And if they did, all the Hillary Clinton men in black people came around and just removed it all with perfection. I'm going around the same circles, guys. And this is the problem, going around in the same circles. Because, even for someone like me, people like me, my explanations are always, how am I supposed to pull explanations outside of the bookends of known reality? I don't go out there too often. I don't travel astrally or whatever. It's difficult, but we need to do this. The only explanation that's ever going to get close is one that's just as crazy of an explanation as you've ever heard. Brandy was inside this thing about 2 months ago. She was kind enough to send me her pictures. It's nice to finally use pictures where some threat of copyright is not looming over the video. Finally, something is not going to be a problem. So first thing she said is the thing is absolutely massive. The statue of Athena is massive. The old Greek Parthenon, the ruins, had the statue of Athena in all gold. It's all ruins. Athena's gone. They stripped out the gold, and they completely recreated it in Nashville. And you see that little thing in her right hand? That little figurine looks like 10 Lords of Leaping or whatever that thing is. I'm supposed to be Hermes, I guess. I don't know. But that thing is 6 feet tall. That little thing, that little Lords of Leaping in her right hand is supposed to be 6 feet tall. That tells you how massive it is. And let's not lose the point here. Whenever you want to do an exhibition for Nashville that celebrates the region, the history, heritage of the region, the United States, it makes perfect sense to put a shrine to Greek gods and to recreate, ancient Greece, and as they always do, ancient Rome, when you're supposed to be celebrating the region. Oh, they had a giant pyramid there as well. That's no longer there. That just was too obvious. They had to get rid of that. And just for note, she said, they're supposed to have real gold in the ancient ruin. It's all gone. She says, it looked like real gold. Was it probably? No. But to paint something that looks like real gold, you have to be, the paint job has to be professional. She said it looked like real gold. I couldn't get close. Is it the real gold from ancient Greece? Probably not. But Who knows the way these creeps do business? She says it was painted so perfectly. She says that's not easy to do. It's not. Just go to your local hardware store, get gold spray paint. It ain't going to look like the real metal. She said there are these doors, too, where, 40 feet tall. Well, Matt, the statue had to come in somehow. I don't build it inside. I don't know. Maybe that's what it's for. Take it in on its side. What do you need those doors for? 20% of the truth community is yelling at me, giants, giants. I'm not going there. It's not the point of this video. I'm not going to start talking about giants, whatever that is. So it's just all around bizarre. Again, the most bizarre thing is the exhibition's supposed to celebrate the region. It's not supposed to celebrate Greek gods. I mean, how did that conversation go down in the back room? Well, yeah, we have some federal funds to do the exhibition. And boy, this will really help the region, Nashville. And, so what should we do? I don't know, like recreation hee haw or the country music, which hasn't yet been developed. But, what do we do? Well, let's celebrate Greek gods. Oh, yeah. Some guy down the end of the table. That's the ticket. Yeah, that's the ticket. That's what we want to do to celebrate the region in this exhibition. How about a pyramid, too? Yeah, pyramid. Let's celebrate Greek gods. What does that have to do with anything? It's so creepy. Well, Matt, that proves that it was an inherited building that was here. Really? Okay, well, there's a lot of like wagon trains that came through, even as early as late 1700s, probably early 1800s, or Matt, Lewis and Clark didn't get out there. So whatever. There were wagon trains that came forth. This was supposed to be, 1897, at least 80 years before. And, Grandpa Jessup in his diary didn't write one page about it, saying, well, we rolled up the wagon trains, the first in this region we're going to call Nashville, or it's being called Nashville, and we think we'll settle here. The land looks fertile. And there were these ancient structures from a civilization that had been here for thousands of years, and let me sketch it out in Grandpa Jessup's diary. Not one page of rolling the wagon train around the corner and having these structures already here. Not one page in any book. Not one page in Grandpa Jessup's diary. Not one page shoved under the couch that the creeps and the men in black with their mind-erasing pens couldn't get to. So that thing, that Lure de Leaping is supposed to be 6 feet tall. So I said, did you bang the columns to make it sure it wasn't facade? She's like, look, I've been to banks and federal buildings. She's like, no, I didn't bang the columns, but it's not facade. It's real. It's a real recreation. We have to do a video sometime of like, how did that conversation go down? And of course, reality breaks down when you have that conversation. Like, who was the first one at the creepy table to propose the 7-Eleven as a part-time job event? Who's the artisan that did the detail on the shield? How did it go down when you have the federal funds are available to do an exhibition in Nashville that somebody proposes they replicate ancient Greece and Greek gods? Well, reality breaks down when you do these sorts of exercises because there was no meeting of local city officials where somebody proposed. It's all done for other reasons, esoteric, occult, hidden reasons we can't comprehend, reasons that understanding the reason itself would appear to most people to be a reality breakdown. So, look, this is all fun and good. And maybe that's the reason this video is so darn long. Matt's just afraid to give his theory. Yeah, I'm probably terrified to give my theory. So let me pause this and let me come back with my best guess. And I'm going to be wrong. This is big stuff, but at least I'm going to take a shot at it. You probably won't like it, but I'm begging the people that cover this to finally take a shot at your theory. Nobody's going to laugh. Nobody's going to laugh because nothing can be more out there than this explanation. But I refuse to think inside the bookends. That's not good enough anymore. You have to think way outside. So my theory is, why does there have to be an explanation? Why does there have to be any explanation? Well, Matt, certainly somebody can explain how these buildings were built. Why? Why? In studying all facets of the nature of reality and the presentation of authority to me in all areas, I find that in every single bucket or topic or area of interest or genre, it all breaks down. Again, we go back to the same stuff. There's no real world that could pull all this stuff off, no matter what your journey to truth, what path led you to where we are now, studying the fake events. They couldn't have pulled that off successfully time after time. The incident in the gambling town by itself is a complete breakdown of reality to me. And even if you disagree on the particulars, we've seen enough at this point. How they pull that off, how they pull this off. It gets back to a few videos back, studying all the elements, the who, what, when, where, why, and how. I alluded a few videos back in that video about if we study the details, that's just a waste of time. That's a distraction that doesn't bring us closer to understanding ourselves. I alluded to that even in the physical reality, the reality can find a way to distract, to pull forth nonsense. And that we're never going to understand it. That's the point. It wants you in a never-ending quest to understand the ununderstandable. Is that a word? It doesn't matter. You understand what I'm saying, even if you don't understand the words that are coming out of my mouth. It's what it wants. My best explanation is Geico. My best explanation is a little green gecko. No, but the slogan of Geico. It's what it does. It's what it does. That's what's so bad about that explanation. It's what it does. Matt, so to distract a certain group of Matt, Dr. Evil, right? Matt, so to distract a certain group of people, to keep them away from their true nature and finding out who they really are and what their reason for being is, the reality itself, because it plays these games and tricks, it can create a distraction over here, somebody that's just in love with Ryan Seacrest and the red carpet. But for these people, it actually constructed 100 million ton buildings and impossible architecture all over the world for them as their distraction. Maybe. Why not? If you truly see the world as illusory, all right, the illusion, the dream, the Plato's closet, the Maya, there's no difference between a gigantic building and a dash in a Kit Kat. One Mandela effect is no different than the other. Somebody that's fixated says, I know there was absolutely a dash in a Kit Kat. Or the Coca-Cola, that dash wasn't up top, it was in the middle, whatever. That's no different than Australia being smushed up against Papua New Guinea, where somebody in a canoe on their day off could row or canoe down to Australia. They're so close. The outlying island of Australia that's officially Australia is 90 miles from Papua New Guinea. See, one is no different in a dream reality. One is no different than the other. Just because one is hundreds of trillions of tons of continent and one's a dash in a Kit Kat, one is more significant than the other? No. If you back up far enough, one may not be any more significant than the other. And this is where the reality hijackers or the minions or the a-holes or the jerks and the lone scums, that's the anagram for Elon's Musk, the new scent of cologne available for the next holiday season. See, they'll hijack reality at the last inning. They'll say, of course, this is some sort of simulation. The chance of this being base reality is 1 in billions. So then people say, well, Matt's saying the same thing as Elon Musk. He must be some sort of shill. No, I'm not saying the same thing as Elon Musk. They want you to believe it's a computer simulation, that it came from their systems, their demonic track towards the technological singularity, their demonic track towards everybody in a digital format, zeros and ones, their spellcraft, their technology. That's a VR helmet is a technology. Living in a dream world where consciousness comes first, that stems from potentially the root of real spiritual consciousness. That's not technology. So if I say reality is an illusion or a hijacked dream, that's not what Elon Musk's saying. He's saying it's a technology. He wants you potentially to convert the reality the way it really is, the dream state that we're here, whether we chose to come here or stuck here or whatever, the dream state that's here, and some call Maya. He wants you to believe it's technology, believe it's virtual reality, believe it's something that it's not. It's a last-second hijacking of the concept. So to people tell me I'm saying the same as Elon Musk. No, I'm not. They're two different things. And I don't think that if you're Mandela affected, Australia's moved for a lot of people. Yeah. That's the craziest thing in the world you've ever heard? Fine. But that's if you're Mandela affected in any way, you've seen reality change in any way. There's no difference between a continent and a dash. Okay, that's what I'm pointing out. But even if you're not Mandela effect we've been through. There's a lot of ways reality is broken down. The inexplainable, the inexplicable, whatever the word is or not the word is. You understand what I'm saying if you don't understand the words that are coming out of my mouth. It doesn't matter. The impossibility of what they pulled off on the 7-Eleven offering up their part-time jobs, the planes, no planes, how they do this, how they coordinate the TV. It's impossible. Impossible. No real world could pull that off. The Gambling Town event. It's impossible. We've been over this many times. There's no way to coordinate the hospitals when nobody came in and to keep that tight-lipped. Impossible. Paid and threatened, paid and threatened, paid and threatened. We know it doesn't work anymore. They pulled that stuff off hundreds of times. The fake history, I agree most of the history we've given is fake, all pulled off to precision. We're living in some sort of illusory hijacked reality. It's pretty simple at this point. As it gets more complicated, the ultimate answer is going to be simple. The reality buttons and levers. Oz wasn't real. Dorothy was in it. It seemed real when Dorothy was in it. She didn't realize she was knocked out in that black and white place with the people tending over her and Toto sitting on the bed. She thought she was really in Oz. We think we're really in Oz. It could be that simple. Part of Dorothy wasn't there, right? Part of you isn't here. There has to be a physical explanation for the building of these buildings, and the only thing I can come up with between my bookends and my simplistic explanation and any sort of first-grade explanation, that's all I can think of between the bookends. It had to have been here. It has to be inherited. It had to be a civilization. And why? Why? I'm playing a Sims game right now, and one of these dumb poor mother effers believes this sim right here in my game, you're not seeing the game, another PC here, he thinks he's alive in there. He thinks that stupid ass thinks he's alive in this Sims game. So I'm going to pull some reality buttons and levers in my Sims game, combine it with one of those games where you like Zynga, where you pay to farm, and I'm going to put a big fucking structure over the hill or over the rainbow for that guy. Look at that sim, he's walking up on the hill right now. And then he didn't even know it was there. I put a big palace on the other side. Look, he's all freaking confused, that sim. He's standing up on the hill and, Martha, you remember this big palace being over here? Come here, Jethro. Look at this fucking thing. Where'd this come? He's all maybe what? How do you know you're not in the same situation? We don't know how reality does business. But guys, look, it's kind of like, what a coincidence. Okay, here we go again. What a coincidence that all these. Are we the first ones to know about these exhibitions? No, I've interviewed that guy who's 80. He knew about the one in Philadelphia. But just now, okay, we're the only ones that can come up with the fact that there's no way these things should have possibly have been built. Anybody living in Philadelphia past 1876 should have been able to walk right by Horticultural Hall or whatever building still remained, or Memorial Hall, which is the Please Touch Museum now, and say, this is how they build. Nobody could come to that realization. How'd they build this with horses, donkeys, jackasses, chisels, hammers, and ropes? We're the only ones that can do that. Doesn't that seem kind of like too easy, too weird? I mean, I don't know. I don't know how to describe it. Doesn't that seem a little strange? Like a guy, I don't know if this was Inception, but you've seen a scenario in a movie where a guy's telling another, you're in a dream. It's like, I'm not. This isn't a dream. It's like every girl you've just tried to hit on is falling for you. It's like that scene in Shallow Hal. It's like, so you can believe that all of a sudden every supermodel wants to fall down for you, or you can start believing me that you're in a dream. See, at some point, the reality itself becomes so ludicrous that somebody the rational person would say, yeah, you know what, this may be a dream. Going back to what was talked about a few videos back, about what a coincidence that Princess Diana died in August of 1997, and Princess Diana, who was Wonder Woman, died in a comic book August of 1997. And, the point is, guys, the list of absurdities that I've then documented in the book, which I don't know, what is it, up to like 1,000 list of impossible coincidences, impossible synchronicities, impossible gematria showing up everywhere, the list of absurdities. So we're going to go through all that for 10 years. Impossible things being pulled off, ridiculous things, Princess Diana. We could do this over and over again. Everybody out your window believing the Russians hacked the election still 4 years later. But buildings, they're real. See, that doesn't apply to buildings or real structures. Why not? Your new Delta Talchi name is Pinto. Why Pinto? Why not? Why not? What? So just because I can pick it up and drop it on my foot, the reality breakdowns can't apply to that. Why not? The list of absurdities, it's too long. It's too long. It's a hijacked dream of some kind. I don't care if it's heavy, or we've seen too many reality breakdowns and absurdities in the physical. Go to Machu Picchu and see gigantic stone blocks all carved into one another. Instead of just square, it's like jagged, but the other one fits in perfectly like a jigsaw puzzle. That just happens over and over and over again. And if you the thinking in between the bookends is, ancient cultures had this technology or spellcraft we're not aware of. Well, okay, maybe, but why do I have to think inside those bookends? If it's truly, Plato's, Plato's closet sells used clothes around here. Plato's cave or Plato's allegory of the cave. It's just a truth drop. I don't believe there's some guy named Plato that just created all this great stuff and wrote it down. Who saved his stuff? Who saved it? Where was it saved? It's reality itself has to deliver these truths in different ways to show you. It's the event horizon. It shows you. If there was this brilliant guy named Plato along thousands of years ago, well, who saved his stuff? Did he just hide it under the rocks the way Arya Stark hid Needle? So she get her sword back. Who saved his stuff? Nobody would think it was that great. So this guy wrote about people stand in a cave just like looking at shadows. He's like, this ain't shit. I'm not saving this. Throw it out. Use it for kindling. Nobody would. It's not that good. It's not that good unless you have the perspective on reality we have now. It's carried through time by reality itself, in my opinion. Like the old age-old question: if a tree falls in the woods, nobody's around to hear it, does it make a sound? If there's no real consciousness observing it, does it make a sound? Like I've proposed many times, and proposed in the books. Whoever put that out, some guy in a pub in the Highlands of Scotland, some guy put that out, and there's 10 other people in the pub. He'd say, guys, if a tree falls and there's nobody real around to hear it, you think it makes a sound? They're like, shut the F up, dude. How many pints have you had? It wouldn't have gone anywhere. It only makes sense in the viewpoint of where we've evolved to, in understanding the quantum nature of things, or fluid reality, or things that can change based on observation. It only makes sense now. It's not good enough to carry itself through history, nor is Plato's cave, nor is Plato's closet. But it does, because reality itself, or even the minions playing their role, a role they probably maybe have to play, see to that it's carried through. See, the truth drops have to be carried forth, carried through. That's how you know this place isn't a prison planet. There's too many good things that have to be carried forth for people that are awake enough to notice. So merrily, 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 row, row, row your boat. Life is but a dream. Just complete truth drop. We talked about that many times. But just when people are starting to forget about it, it put it in a major Star Trek motion picture where the three of them, Kirk, Spock, McCoy, of all songs and all the Ginjoids and all the world to sing around and sing. Spock, we're going to teach you an old one and a good one. You go, row, 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 and I'll follow behind you, row, row, row. Of all the songs in all the world, that's carried forth. So another generation is reminded to row, row, row your boat. Shit is carried through time on purpose.